We are no stranger to Citroen Xantias here on the Hubnut channel. This is the third one we've featured. We've already featured very early days of the channel. One of the earliest road tests was the V6, which sounded magnificent. That ES9 engine is an absolute peach. More recently, we visited Jono at Peak 2CV and we drove his Phase 2 HDI. But this is a much earlier car. In fact, it's thought to be the earliest surviving diesel in the UK. It's on an L plate. It was built in 1993, first registered in 1994, and it's what's known as a sinker. Well, what on earth is a sinker? A sinker is a Xantia where the suspension, when you turn it off, it will eventually lower itself all the way back down to the ground. But fairly early on, feedback suggested that people just wanted a normal car you could get in and drive and you didn't have to wait for the suspension. So they fitted an extra sphere which held the car at constant ride height. It would eventually sink, but generally overnight, a few days, that sphere would hold enough pressure to hold the car up at its usual ride height. But for me, a proper Citroen lover, I want a sinker because I want the drama of every time you start it, it goes up in the air. Now this is a very early 1.9 diesel. It is only the XUD non-turbo, so a quick peek at the engine bay, see how it compares with the HDI. So here is the fearsome XUD non-turbo diesel, 70 brake horsepower, 1905cc. This is the engine that was first seen in the Talbot Horizon before becoming an absolute staple. Many Peugeots and Citroen models, famously the BX, is the car that really helped the BX cement its reputation as a formidable daily driver. And this engine just carried over straight into the Xantia. They also brought the turbo diesel over, although in larger 1.9 litre form for the Xantia, which shares its platform with the Peugeot 406. But really, this is very much an evolution of the 405/BX platform. So we've got these McPherson struts, but with suspension cylinders atop them. Here is the LHM tank. This is a fairly lowly spec. This is just an SX, so it only has 4 spheres. The VSX introduced hydractive suspension, which had a center sphere, quite soft setting. So as you were driving along normally, the car would be super soft, and then it would lock that sphere out when you were getting a bit of a move on. You could put it in a sport mode and it would firm up the suspension. Very clever system. But none of that. This is a fairly lowly spec, but it's not all bad news, as we'll see inside. But obviously what we can see is this is a much simpler engine bay to the HDI, which is mostly covered in a big plastic cover. Here we can see the engine, we can see the injectors, we can see the glow plugs even, then the fuel pump is just right here, big mechanical fuel pump. Output is about 70 brake horsepower. It's allied to a 5-speed gearbox, but if that still felt a bit too much for you, you could actually get this engine with an automatic transmission. Citroen didn't have access to a gearbox that could handle more torque than this could put out. So turbo diesels, for a long time, there was no automatic option. It only came with the later Phase 2. Now, it must be said, apologies for the mud, we're in rural Wales. This is a very beautiful car. Styling by Bertoni, very much working with Citroen's designers. But one of the cast-off designs for this went into the Daewoo Espero. But if I pull the lever up, she should gently raise herself into the air. Just pull that back to the normal position and we just wait for her to rise up. And the novelty of this never wears off, which is why the idea of an anti-sink sphere is something alien to a proper Citroenist. It's so cold today, I'm going to do this interior look around with the engine running, so I hope you'll forgive me. But yeah, lovely big comfortable seats, as you'd probably expect, and a decent amount of space in the back, as we'll see in a moment. We've covered all this before really, but what we haven't really seen is a Series 1 early interior, and it feels remarkably austere in many ways. For this simple 2-spoke steering wheel does have buttons for the stereo and the stereo, that's it. Nice simple dials up ahead, and I like that it's actually got the temperatures as well as the units for fuel, but it looks a bit blanking pluggy over there. Let's put some lights on. I think that will give us a warning light. No, oh no, there they are, very dim over there. And the main beam thusly Put the hazard lights on. Very quiet, respectful little indicator. See 135,000 miles on this example. Got heated rear window, cassette player here with memory functions. Unfortunately, it needs a code. Nice sliders for the heater controls. Jim's stylish sunglasses and fitting for Wales, an all-weather notebook. But one detail I love, this one has aftermarket cruise control. I've never seen anything like that before. So that's quite nice. You've got the electric mirror switch over here, electric windows. We've got central locking. Of course, you get power steering because this is the last Citroen to use that all LHM, liquid wheel mineral, life support system. So the steering, the brakes, the suspension, all controlled by one hydraulic system, albeit one hydraulic system with multiple facets. And that means you get sublime ride comfort, you get the adjustable ride height, and you also get the fact that when you put weight in the back, it'll self-level and automatically feed more braking power to the rear brakes. Now you'll hear the idle will drop down every now and then. That's because the hydraulic pump is just kicking in just to keep the pressure up. So that does happen. But yeah, really, I just like it in here. It's very comfortable. A very nice place to sit. 5-speed gearbox. Here is the suspension height control. So it's forward to go down and back to go up with an intermediate height to use on the road if you're experiencing rough terrain. So you can just raise it just slightly. And we've got electric windows in the back and an electric sunshine roof. I'm not going to operate it. It's raining. That's just asking for trouble. But yeah, really nice place to sit. No airbags, but you do get a big grab handle. And if we open the glove box, plenty in here, including now 28. That's what I call music. Oh yeah, it's from the right sort of time period as well. We've got Love Is All Around by Wet Wet Wet. I hate that. Don't Turn Around, Ace of Base. Aswad. And oh, Shine, I remember that track. I think I saw Aswad live back in the day. So very much a mid-90s soundtrack there. Another Sad Love Song by Tony Braxton. I'd rather not, but each to their own. Let's just hop in the rear. Now getting in the back is much easier than a BX because these rear doors are absolutely enormous. So it's very easy to hop in and have a sit down. And good amount of headroom, head's not touching, good amount of knee room, centre armrest. Look, even a tissue holder, aftermarket tissue holder. That's a lovely detail. Oh, we've got Richard Hammond with us as well. As you do, Richard Hammond. He looks a lot older now, but as do we all, Richard, as do we all. But yeah, really nice place to sit. Now, I'm not going to have a look in the boot because Jim's got it absolutely rammo full of stuff. It is a big old boot and the seat folds to extend that space. But if you want to see a really messy Xantia boot, go and check out my silver Xantia HDI test because Jono's was in a bit of a state. Happy to mention it again, Jono. So the big question is, I guess, is a 70 brake horsepower diesel absolute misery? We asked ourselves this question with a Volkswagen Caddy very recently, but this at least is a much older car. Yeah, we're back up to normal suspension height. I haven't taken the handbrake off properly. It doesn't seem to like releasing. There we go. We'll put that one down to because French. Oh yeah, windscreen wiper performance. Don't need to wash today. Unfortunately, there is a big triangle of doom right here. That came from with the Xantias from new. I'm going to have to operate the rear wiper. You can't see that, sorry. Oh, that blade's terrible. Oh dear. Oh no, a broken Berlingo. Bad times. There we go. I've put wipers on a bit more permanently. It's turning into a soggy old day. I'm glad I've filmed the walk around already. But yeah, the level of refinement on offer is already very impressive, I think. And it was a marked step up from the BX. BX was a very good car, but this just feels like taking it up a notch. It really does feel very impressive, very peaceful, and you can barely hear the engine at all. So what is a bit rattly on the outside, it's very smooth inside, and it's all about smooth power. There's no turbo lag because there is no turbo. So the power delivery is very linear. And I was expecting this engine to struggle in the Xantia. It is a lot heavier than the BX. It doesn't have quite so many clever weight-saving features, and it is a larger car. But actually, it feels okay. On the hills, obviously, it struggles a bit. but for just driving around, it's actually really pleasant. I don't imagine the 1.9 diesel automatic was a lot of fun though. That must have been rather hard work. But yeah, it's the ride that really impresses. It is so smooth. I've kind of forgotten just how good these are in that regard. And of course they handle well as well, because Peugeot Citroen very good at doing that sort of thing. So you can punt it into a bend and it feels really well planted. It has the passive rear wheel steering of the ZX as well, but just helps it feel that bit more secure. Well, that's what they say. It's very hard to prove otherwise. I think fundamentally these are fine handling cars with that typical mix of great handling but absolutely superb ride quality. There are two really horrible bumps about here. There's one, there's the second one, and I heard them, but I didn't really feel them. And the only other car on the fleet that does that is the GSA. Every other car bangs horribly over those bumps. As you can hear, now we're approaching 60 miles an hour. It's definitely starting to feel a bit revvy. And I will say, having owned many non-turbo diesel BXs, those revs can get a bit tiring on a motorway. So we're doing sort of 2,800 revs at 60 miles an hour. We're just a bit low. So there we go, that's up to 60. That means you're going to be comfortably over 3,000 revs at 70 miles an hour. And yeah, a little tiring perhaps. Although on the plus side, you can always just turn the stereo up. The engine noise, it intrudes a bit less than a BX. Yep, don't have to worry about wheel spin. Really wring its neck. Not really much point doing that though, because you can just use the torque. So yeah, revving it is kind of pointless. But yeah, compared to say the C5, the next generation family car from Citroen, this feels much more Citroen. The C5 had conventional brakes, conventional steering. Just think about the feel of the steering, the feel of the brakes. You can definitely feel the power in those brakes if you lean on them a bit. Yeah, it really, really does stop. Famously, the Xantia was on Watchdog, a TV program that looked for dodgy things back in the day, and the dodgy thing was the handbrake. The handbrake was so poor, I think Citroen did do a recall in the end, because it operates on the front wheels, and what would happen is you'd apply the handbrake with the brakes all nice and hot, and then the brakes would cool down and the car would go rolling off. But never trust a handbrake, always leave a car in gear would be my easy solution to that problem. So yeah, if you're just making progress like this, it's just lovely, and unlike the BX, there is somewhere to rest your clutch foot. But yeah, generally it does feel a step up from the BX. I mean, I've got two windscreen wipers for a start. Look at that for luxury. So the Xantia enjoyed quite the production life. There were the phase 2 improvements, like we saw with Jono's car. An interim diesel option was the 2.1 turbo diesel, 110 brake horsepower, shared with the Citroen XM. And I've had an XM with that engine, and that engine was a big improvement on the 1.9. The turbo much less laggy and cut in a good 500 revs earlier on the rev range to make it more relaxing to drive. But all the diesel engines swept aside by the HDI engines, which you could have in 90 brake horse or 110 brake horse flavour. Petrols wise, I think it went from 1.6 petrol up to that glorious V6. And the V6 is definitely worth a look. Weakest engine, I'm going to say, is probably the 2-litre Turbo 4 as fitted to the Activa. This is where the suspension can get a bit confusing on these. This just has hydro pneumatic suspension. The VSX and other high trim levels could be had with Hydractive 2, which had that centre sphere that could be locked in and out. So effectively hydro pneumatic suspension, but with a sport mode. And then there was the Activa, which actively cancelled out body roll with hydro pneumatic anti-roll bars. I think they have a total of 11 suspension spheres on an Activa. Go and watch up and down videos. He is currently trying to make a track car out of an Activa. Interesting to see progress on that one. But yeah, this is just very pleasant. I think we probably need some twistier roads. So, woo! We should go down here. I'm just testing those brakes. They're a little difficult to modulate, I'm going to say. Sounds weird to be changing gear so shortly, but that's how it works. The gear ratios are nicely spaced, although obviously it does mean a little buzzy at speed. I think the gearing, looking at where the revs were at 60, possibly a little taller than the BX was. So maybe a little more relaxing. I seem to remember the BX non-turbo diesels were doing 3,500 revs at 70 miles an hour. I do much prefer having two wipers. I'm amazed I've never owned a Xantia. Why have I never owned a Xantia? But the Xantia had some very tough competition at the time. The P10 Primera, the Rover 600, the Ford Mondeo, the Vauxhall Cavalier, and then Vectra. It was a very, very popular market sector and very well served. There was some stiff competition. Peugeot 406, of course, the in-house rival. And what a beautiful looking car that was as well. Pininfarina working with Peugeot, whereas Bertoni was working with Citroen. So I think you got some of the most stylish family cars we've ever been treated to. And really, a lot of them still make perfectly good daily drivers today, as long as you can live without your Bluetooth and perhaps cup holders. I know Jim said that is one shortcoming of the Xantia, the lack of cup holders. Are there any in the glove box lid? No, none. It has no cup holders. But much like the XM, the handling's so good that the Xantia feels much smaller and much more nimble than you might expect, even on a twisty road like this. Well, it's nice to have the backup of those powerful hydraulic brakes. So hydro pneumatic brakes, as fitted to Xantia, BX, GSA, DS, etc., work by effectively having 2,000 psi of pressure for you control, and you're letting more and more of that pressure out as you press the pedal more, rather like air brakes on a truck. So the pressure's always there, you just let more and more of it through, and it means you can stop very, very quickly indeed. But I must say, this car has impressed me. I came into this test thinking I wouldn't like it, thinking this will just be too slow. And I think if you were trying to get a hurry on, then yeah, it would be infuriating. But the gearing works actually really well with the limited power on offer, so it doesn't feel that slow unless you're going up a really steep hill, which we probably will be in a minute because we're in rural Wales. You can just leave it in gear. We're in third gear doing 15 miles an hour. Alright, let's try again. No, I don't think it's working, unfortunately. I was very curious to know how it worked, but given it's a mechanical fuel pump, but nonetheless it doesn't. Sad times. So there we go, that was the Citroen Xantia non-turbo diesel. I may have to review my thoughts on those. I think that was actually a really nice car to drive. Not quick, but somehow quick enough, and so very, very refined despite being a agricultural diesel engine. Really, really very nice. Just such a good car. I think I may need to own a Xantia. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the store and buy lovely goodies. Oh, and do check out the Also Driven channel. I'm not sure if they featured this car, but they do have many interesting vehicles. And I shall see you in a future video. Farewell. Look at this dribble of disappointment. There you go. Did you enjoy that?